I never thought betrayal would hit me from the two people I trusted most. My boyfriend. And my best friend. When I first found out, it felt like my entire world was crashing in on itself. Imagine standing in a room where the walls suddenly start closing in, the air thinning, and you can't breathe no matter how hard you try. That's what it felt like when the truth hit me. I remember the exact moment, the text message that wasn't meant for me. My phone lit up, and curiosity made me glance. But what I saw, it wasn't just a simple mistake. It was a message that cut straight through my chest. His words weren't for me. They were for her. Sweet words. Words that used to belong to me. At first, my brain refused to believe it. I stared at the screen, waiting for it to rearrange itself into something harmless, something innocent. But no, it stayed there, black and white, spelling out the truth I didn't want to see. My heart pounded in my ears. I felt sick. My stomach churned like I'd swallowed a storm. And in that moment, I wanted to scream, to cry, to run, but all I could do was sit frozen, staring at proof that the two people I loved most were sharing something behind my back. And here's the worst part. This wasn't just about him being unfaithful. This wasn't just about her breaking my trust. This was about two people, the very two I thought would protect me, conspiring in silence right under my nose. It's the kind of betrayal you don't just recover from. It changes you. It shatters something deep inside, something you can never fully put back together. In that moment, I had so many questions spinning in my head. How long had this been happening? Were all those late-night excuses, all those sudden changes in plans lies? And why her? Of all the people in the world, why did it have to be her? I wanted answers. But more than that, I wanted to know when exactly everything started slipping away. Because betrayal doesn't just fall out of the sky. It builds slowly, quietly, in shadows you don't notice until they've swallowed you whole. That was the beginning of my unraveling. And now I'm going to take you back to where it all started. Back to the love story that seemed so perfect. Back to the friendship I thought would last forever. Back to the signs I missed, the lies I ignored, and the storm that was brewing long before I ever saw it coming. Because to understand how devastating this betrayal was, you need to know just how much I loved them both. And maybe, by the end of the story, you'll understand why this isn't just about heartbreak. It's about survival. Before everything fell apart, things were beautiful. At least, that's what I believed. I met him in the most ordinary way, a coffee shop, of all places. I was standing in line, half awake, clutching my phone, when I heard someone behind me crack a joke about how slow the barista was moving. I turned around and there he was, smiling. Warm. Confident. The kind of smile that made you feel like the room suddenly had more light. We started talking, and before I knew it, we were sitting at a corner table, sipping coffee, as if we'd known each other for years. I remember walking home that day thinking, wow, maybe this is something. And for a while, it really was. He was attentive, sweet, and always made me feel like I was the only person in the world who mattered. A few months in, I introduced him to my best friend. Now, let me tell you about her. She wasn't just a friend. She was like a sister to me. We had grown up together, sleepovers, secrets, late-night phone calls, dreams, heartbreaks, all of it. She was the one who held my hand through every rough patch in my life. The one who knew my deepest fears and my wildest dreams. So naturally, when I started dating him, she was the first person I wanted him to meet. I wanted the two most important people in my life to get along. And they did. Too well, maybe. But at the time, I didn't think anything of it. The three of us became this little trio. We'd go out for dinners, game nights, even short road trips. I loved it. To me, it was proof of how lucky I was to have a boyfriend who got along with my best friend, and a best friend who welcomed him into our circle without hesitation. I remember one night vividly. We were sitting on the couch, the three of us, watching a movie. I was curled up against him, and she was laughing at something on the screen. And I thought to myself, this is it. This is happiness. I had no idea, of course, that the seeds of betrayal were already being planted. But back then, all I saw was trust. I trusted him with my heart. I trusted her with my soul. And I never thought either of them would betray me. Looking back now, I realized there were small things I ignored. The way she sometimes lingered in conversation with him. The way he laughed a little too hard at her jokes. But in my mind, I brushed it off as paranoia. Because when you're in love, you don't go hunting for cracks. You only see what you want to see. For me, the setup of this entire tragedy was built on one thing. Blind trust. I trusted both of them completely. And that trust, that innocence, is exactly what made the betrayal cut so deep later on. But at that time, I thought my life was perfect. I thought I had everything. And maybe that's the cruelest part of betrayal. It never shows up when you're bracing for it. It strikes when you're at your happiest. When your guard is down. It didn't happen all at once. When you believe you're safe. Betrayal rarely does. I believed I was safe. At first, it was just little things. Tiny cracks that seemed harmless on their own. but slowly added up to something I could no longer ignore. He started pulling away. Not physically at first, but emotionally. The good morning texts that used to flood my phone every day suddenly became short, delayed replies. Our conversations, once full of laughter and plans for the future, became clipped, distant, almost mechanical. I told myself he was stressed. Maybe work was getting to him. Maybe he was just tired. Relationships go through phases, right? That's what I kept reminding myself. But then my best friend began acting different too. She was always bubbly, always eager to tell me everything, from what she ate for lunch to the random TikTok that made her laugh. Suddenly, she became quieter, harder to read. Sometimes she would dodge questions, or change the subject when I asked what she'd been up to. Still, I gave her the benefit of the doubt. We'd been friends for years. I thought maybe she had something going on in her own life she wasn't ready to share. But the coincidences started piling up. One night, he told me he was too busy to hang out because of work. Fair enough. But a few hours later, I saw her Instagram story, and there they were. Both of them. At the same restaurant. Together. My heart dropped, but my brain jumped in to protect me. Maybe it wasn't what it looked like. Maybe she just ran into him by accident. Maybe they happened to be in the same place at the same time. The excuses I created in my head were endless. Because the truth was too painful to even consider. But once you notice something, you can't unsee it. I began to realize they texted each other more often than I thought. They had inside jokes I wasn't part of. He'd laugh at something she said, then glance at me, almost guilty, before brushing it off. And then came the excuses. He'd cancel plans with me, claiming he was too tired, but then I'd find out he had been out with her. She'd tell me she couldn't hang out because she had family stuff, only for me to later see her tagged in pictures with him. The walls of my trust were cracking, but I kept patching them up with lies I told myself. Because admitting the truth meant admitting that the two people I loved most were capable of betraying me. And I wasn't ready to face that. One night, though, things became harder to ignore. We were all at my apartment, the three of us. I went to the kitchen to grab drinks, and when I came back, I saw them sitting close. Too close. Her hand brushed against his arm, and his smile lingered a little too long. They both shifted when they noticed me, pretending like nothing happened. I laughed it off in the moment, but inside, I felt something break. It was like my instincts were screaming at me. Something isn't right. Pay attention. But the human heart is stubborn. I kept telling myself I was overthinking, that I was paranoid, that jealousy was clouding my judgment. Still, my nights became restless. I'd lie awake replaying every interaction in my head, dissecting every word, every look, every text message. The tension was eating me alive. And yet, even with all the red flags waving in front of me, I wasn't ready to confront either of them. I was terrified of the answer I might get. So I stayed silent. I let the cracks grow wider. I kept hoping it was all in my head. But deep down, I think I already knew. I just didn't want to admit it. Because once you admit it, there's no going back. And soon enough, the cracks wouldn't just stay cracks. They were about to shatter everything I thought I knew. It happened on a night I will never forget. A night that split my life into two parts, before I knew the truth and after. I had been drowning in suspicion for weeks, maybe months. The cracks in my relationship and my friendship had been spreading wider and wider. But a part of me kept clinging to hope. Hope that I was wrong. Hope that my mind was playing tricks on me. Hope that the people I trusted most couldn't possibly betray me in the one way that would shatter me completely. But hope is fragile. And mine was about to break. That evening, my boyfriend told me he had to work late. It was nothing unusual. He had used that excuse plenty of times before. I nodded, kissed him goodbye, and told him not to overwork himself. Deep down, though, something felt off. That little voice inside me, the one I had been silencing, was screaming louder than ever. On impulse, I decided to text my best friend, asking if she wanted to hang out. No reply. I called her. Straight to voicemail. Strange, since she was always glued to her phone. I brushed it off, tried to distract myself, but the unease wouldn't leave me. My stomach churned. My chest tightened. Something wasn't right. And then fate stepped in. Scrolling through social media, I stumbled across a tagged post from someone we all knew. A group picture, taken at a bar across town. And there they were, side by side, smiling, together. My breath caught in my throat. My body went cold. Every excuse I had ever told myself, every little lie I had used to patch over the cracks, came crashing down in an instant. There was no denying it now. But I needed more than a picture. I needed the truth. So, against my better judgment, I grabbed my keys and drove. The drive felt endless, yet somehow, I arrived too soon. My hands shook on the steering wheel. My heart pounded so hard I thought it might burst. I pulled up to the bar and through the window I saw them. Not just sitting near each other. Not just smiling. His hand was on hers. Their heads leaned close together, whispering, laughing in that way two people do when the world around them disappears. I froze. My legs refused to move. I couldn't breathe. The sight hit me like a physical blow, a punch straight to the chest. This wasn't just suspicion anymore. This was betrayal, unfolding right in front of me. For a moment, I considered walking away, pretending I hadn't seen it, going home and letting ignorance shield me for just a little longer. But something inside me, the part that had been silenced for too long, finally roared to life. I pushed the door open and stepped inside. The noise of the bar seemed to fade around me as my eyes locked on them. The second they saw me, everything changed. Their laughter died instantly. His hand shot back like he had touched fire. Her face went pale. And in that silence, everything was confirmed. Really? I heard myself say, my voice shaking but louder than I expected. This is what you've been doing? This is what you've both been hiding. Neither of them spoke. They didn't have to. Their guilty faces said more than words ever could. Tears burned in my eyes, but anger kept them from falling. I wasn't going to give them the satisfaction of seeing me break. How long? I demanded. My voice cracked, but I pushed on. How long have you been sneaking around behind my back? My best friend, the girl I trusted with every secret, every heartbreak, looked away, her lips trembling. My boyfriend, the man who had promised to love me, opened his mouth but couldn't form a single excuse. And in that moment, something inside me shattered completely. I had lost them both. Not just a relationship, not just a friendship, but the foundation of trust one had built my life on. The bar was buzzing with noise again, but I felt like I was underwater. Their faces blurred, the world spun, and I knew I couldn't stay there another second. Without another word, I turned and walked out. My legs felt like stone, but somehow, they carried me to my car. The tears I had been holding back finally spilled over. I sobbed until my chest ached, gripping the steering wheel like it was the only thing holding me together. I had always imagined heartbreak would feel like sadness. But this wasn't just sadness. It was rage. It was betrayal. It was humiliation. The people I loved most had looked me in the eyes, smiled at me, and then gone behind my back to destroy everything we had. But the days that followed, night, those I realized my world would never. I remember waking up the next morning and feeling like the world had tilted off its axis. My bed felt too big, my room too empty, and my chest too heavy. I stared at the ceiling, trying to convince myself it had all been a nightmare. But the truth replayed in my head like a cruel movie, his hand on hers, their guilty faces, the silence that screamed louder than words ever could. For a while, I went numb. I stopped eating properly. I ignored calls and texts. I let my phone buzz itself to death while I hid under the covers, trapped in a fog of disbelief. It wasn't just about losing a boyfriend or a best friend. It was about losing everything I thought was real. But even in the middle of that darkness, something inside me kept whispering, "You can't stay here forever." The first shift came quietly. I caught my reflection in the mirror one night, red eyes swollen from crying, hair a tangled mess, and I barely recognized myself. That girl staring back wasn't me. She was broken, yes, but she was also still alive. Still breathing. Still standing, even if just barely. And that realization lit the smallest spark. I started journaling, messy, tear-stained pages filled with every thought I was too scared to say out loud. Writing became my outlet, my way of pouring the poison out instead of letting it fester inside me. I wrote about how foolish I felt, how blind I had been, how I had ignored the red flags, his dismissiveness, her strange excuses, the little gut feelings I had shoved aside. And with every page, I began to see a pattern. This wasn't about me not being enough. This was about them choosing deceit over honesty, betrayal over loyalty. The blame wasn't mine to carry anymore. For the first time, I stopped asking myself, why wasn't I good enough? And started asking, why did I allow people who didn't value me to hold so much of my heart? That shift was powerful, painful, but powerful. I also started to see the bigger picture, how much of myself I had lost in trying to keep them happy. How many times I had silenced my intuition, laughed off little digs, brushed away late replies, all to protect relationships that weren't protecting me in return. And slowly, clarity began to replace confusion. It wasn't an overnight transformation. Healing never is. Some days I still broke down, replaying memories that now felt tainted. Some nights I still cried until my pillow was damp. But each time I fell apart, I noticed it took me a little less time to put myself back together. I leaned on small routines. Long walks with music blasting in my ears. Cooking meals for myself, even when I didn't feel like eating. Calling my mom and letting her voice remind me that unconditional love still existed. And with every step, I felt a shift, from heartbreak to resilience, from despair to empowerment. The more I thought about it, the more I realized their betrayal wasn't the end of me. It was the end of them. It was the end of a chapter one had been forcing myself to keep reading, even when the story had stopped making sense. And now, I had the power to close the book. By the end of that week, I made a decision. I blocked his number. I deleted her from every contact, every social media feed. At first, it hurt like cutting off a limb, but then it felt like taking off chains. They no longer had access to me, to my time, to my energy. It was the first boundary I had drawn in a long time, and it felt good. I wasn't fully healed yet. I wasn't magically over it. But for the first time since that awful night, I felt a sense of control, a sense of power returning to me, piece by piece. And deep down, I knew this was just the beginning of choosing me. I wish I could tell you that after the confrontation, things got easier. But the truth is it didn't. When the dust settled, I found myself staring at the broken pieces of my life, unsure of what to do next. Everywhere I turned, there were reminders of what I had lost. Late-night calls with my best friend, sweet texts from my boyfriend, inside jokes that now felt poisoned. It was like my entire world had been set on fire, and I was standing in the ashes. For days, I wrestled with the same question. What now? Do I forgive them? Do I fight for the love and friendship I once believed in? Or do I walk away, leaving everything behind? Part of me wanted to forgive, to pretend it never happened, to convince myself that maybe I had overreacted, that maybe everyone makes mistakes. But every time I tried to silence my pain, their betrayal came roaring back louder than before. Forgiveness, at least for now, was impossible. So I made a choice. Not for them, but for me. I chose to let go. To stop holding on to people who had already let go of me. To stop fighting for relationships that were never fighting for me. It wasn't easy. In fact, it was the hardest decision I've ever made. Walking away felt like ripping out a part of myself. But sometimes, the bravest thing you can do is close the door on what's hurting you and step into the unknown. I blocked his number. I unfollowed her on social media. And for the first time in months, I finally felt free. Free from the lies. Free from the manipulation. Free from people who pretended to love me while stabbing me in the back. And as painful as it was, I realized something. Losing them wasn't the end of my story. It was just the beginning of a new one. Because sometimes, betrayal doesn't break you. It builds you. It forces you to grow stronger, to demand better, to love yourself in ways you never did before. And that's exactly what I chose to do. I walked away, not because I didn't care, but because I finally cared enough about myself. And in the silence that followed, I discovered a truth that changed everything. I never needed them to define my worth. I was enough all along.